Okay, so for consumer surplus, recall that the demand curve, so consumer surplus. So what I want you to remember is that when we draw a demand curve, what we're also drawing is someone's maximum willingness to pay. Okay, and so what this curve says is that for the first, let's say, can of soda, right? So 1 can of soda, the maximum that someone is willing to pay is, let's say, $4, right? Because they're really thirsty. And for the second can, the maximum they'd be willing to pay is, let's say, $3. And the third can, all right, let's say $2. And the fourth can, let's say $1. Okay, and so what we're saying here is the absolute most that someone will be willing to pay for the very first can of soda they have, that day is $4. Okay, but what the equilibrium price tells us is how much they will actually pay. Right? And so let's say that the equilibrium price is, let me get a different color here. Let's say the equilibrium price is $2. So $2 for a can of soda, right? What we would say is that for the first can of soda, right, the person is willing to pay $4. So they value the can of soda at $4, right? But because the equilibrium price is $2, they only pay $2 for it, right? So they're willing to pay 4, but they only have to pay 2. Okay? And so what this is saying is that by having the soda, they have something that they value at $4, but they've only given up 2. Okay, so they value the first soda at $4, but they only pay $2. And so the soda is worth $2 more to them than the price. Okay? And so what we have here is a situation where the consumer surplus, or the soda, is worth $2 more than they paid for it. All right? And so we call this extra worth, right? That extra worth is the consumer surplus. Right? We can think of it in a number of ways. We can think of it as the extra worth that consumers get from purchasing things. Right? We can also think of it as the additional gains over and above price. Right? Because notice that they paid $2 for it, but they received $4 worth of benefit. And so all this black area here would be consumer surplus, right? And if they were to buy a second soda, right, so if they buy another soda, the maximum they'd be willing to pay is $3. They pay $2, and so they get another $1 worth of consumer surplus, right? And if they were to buy a third soda, they value it at $2, they pay $2, so they would get no consumer surplus from purchasing the third soda, right? So if you notice, what we've got here is a situation where the consumer surplus is actually, if you can buy fractions of cans of soda, is actually going to be this whole triangle up here. And so we can think of it as the area under the demand curve and above the price that is being paid. Okay, sorry, I covered up the definition there, right? So the consumer surplus is all of the area underneath the demand curve, but above the price that is being paid, right? It's typically a triangle, not always though. So we're going to show some examples where it might not be, okay? But generally speaking, the easiest way to find consumer surplus is to find the demand curve, the price that people are actually paying, and find all the area beneath the demand curve and above that price, right? And that will always be true. That will always be the consumer surplus, okay? Producer surplus is very similar. So producer surplus, right? If we think about what the supply curve is, right? The supply curve represents the minimum price at which producers would be willing to sell, right? Because, as we remember, the supply curve is the marginal cost curve, right? And so if you charge your marginal cost, you're not making money, but you're not losing money either. Okay, and so the supply curve is the minimum price at which the producers would be willing to sell. But, right, so they might be willing to sell, the first unit here for, let's say, $1, and the second unit for, let's say, $2, right, and the third unit for $3, and the fourth unit, right, for $4, right? Because as we recall from earlier lectures, marginal cost is increasing, and so the price of each additional unit, the minimum price, right, would have to be increasing as well. And so let's do another color again. Let's say the equilibrium price is, let's go with $3 again, just kind of for fun. Okay. So here, right, the equilibrium price is $3. Okay. Oh, that's the demand curve, sorry. There we are. And price quantity. Always label your axes. Okay. And so here, right, the producer, right, is willing to sell the first unit for $1, but they are selling it for $3, which is $2 more than what they'd be willing to sell it for, right? And so we can think about producer surplus in the same way as consumer surplus, right? It's the additional gains that producers receive over and above cost, specifically marginal cost, from trade. Okay? So they're willing to sell this thing for $1, but they sell it for $3. So that's $2 of additional surplus, right? And if they were to sell a second unit, they'd be willing to sell it for $2, but again, they're going to sell it for $3, right? And so they get this. And once again, right, if we were able to sell fractions of units and everything, we would find that the producer surplus is this whole triangle here. Okay? And so the producer surplus is all of the area above the supply curve and below the price that is actually being received. Okay, so it's all the area above the supply curve and below the price that is actually being received. Okay, and so these two things, right, if I get another sheet real quick, right, these two concepts, okay, demonstrate to us the gains from trade that happen. Right, so this whole area here is all consumer surplus, and this whole area here is all producer surplus, right? And these consumer surplus plus the producer surplus are equal to the total gains from trade. Okay? These are the total benefits of all the trade that happens, right? These are the sources of that double thank you, if you remember that from a previous lecture as well. The reason why you thank the cashier is because you're receiving consumer surplus. And the reason why the cashier or the company thanks you is because they're receiving producer surplus, right? And so these are the gains from trade. This is a thank you, and this is a thank you. Okay, so that covers everything I want to do with consumer surplus and producer surplus for today. In the next lesson, we're going to expand this and start talking about international trade and consumer surpluses and everything from that. Okay, so check out the next lecture once you get a chance.